and welcome to another episode of FooBar. In today's video, we are going to use AWS Lambda to validate the user input in our Lex bot. If you're interested in watching more content like this, subscribe to my channel in the red button below. I post a video every Tuesday. So let's get started. So as I say, today we are using AWS Lambda. We are integrating it with AWS Lex, that is the bot service from AWS, and together we will do some user input validation. So whenever the user inputs a text or speaks to a text, the Lambda will be validating that user input and we will returning things to the user. So if you're new to AWS Lambda, you can check my playlist on Serverless, that it will explain you a little bit about that. Also, if you're new with AWS Lex, you can check my previous video in this series about AWS Lex and how you can create your bot and what is a bot for Lex and all that stuff in this other video that I will link. So the idea here is very simple. The user will be typing something, imagine, or saying, but let's think of typing. Let's use a Slack as we integrated in our previous video. We integrated Slack, so we will use Slack as an example, but you know, Lex also works with voice, so the same applies for it. So imagine the user types something. So let's go back to our example of ordering coffee. So the user types, I want a cappuccino, and then Lex will ask, check if cappuccino is inside of the slots that we defined it, and it will just return, yes, cappuccino is fine. But what happens when you have combinations of different slots? So for example, you have large cappuccinos, or you have double espressos, and you don't have double cappuccinos. So when you want to validate that the slots kind of make sense together, you need to use some more complicated validation tools. And for example, in this case, we will use Lambda. So in our example that we are coding next, we are having a new slot called sizes, and there we'll have large, double, and normal. And for example, espressos can be double or there can be normal. Americanos can be only normal, and lattes and cappuccinos can be large or normal. So given those rules, we will create a Lambda that will process those rules and will return the user right messages according to what they input. So if they input they want a large Americano, they will get, no, sorry, Americanos are only sold in normal sizes. Another thing we can do, if the user doesn't input any size, then we can always default it to normal. For example, that's something else we can do with the AWS Lambda. So in this episode we are going to code that. In the next episode we are going to do the fulfillment with AWS Lambda, so keep following this playlist so you can know more about it. But let's start understanding how Lambda and Lex talk to each other. As you know, Lambda gets triggered when an event triggers it, and in this case it's a Lex event. The user types something. That's an event. So whenever the user types something, Lex will be sending a message to Lambda, and this message will contain all these things. So in this message we will have the huge JSON with all this kind of information. So we will have the current intent, the name, all the slots that the user has filled. We'll have the confirmation for that intent, if it's confirmed, if it's not yet, or if it's denied. Then the bot name will have what is the alias, what is the version. We'll have the user ID that we will be using later in this series to validate users and register users and use information from users. Then we have the transcript, or for example it text user for invocating this intent, so if the user is speaking or if the typing thing. We have the invocation source, that is the fulfillment, or if it's a dialog validation, so what is the source of invocation of this event. In our case we are going to work with the dialog code hook now, and in the next video we are going to work with fulfillment code hook, so stay tuned. Then the output dialog mode, if we need to send text, voice, or whatever, but that's depending on what is the input. And then we have some session attributes that we can use as well, and the message version. So that's what the Lambda will get, and with that things Lambda can do many things. And then in our case it needs to respond in some way. There's different types of responses that Lambda can sell to Lex, so Lex can do different things. In this example we are going to look at two. of these responses, and later on we will look at the other responses. So the ones we are going to check are the delegate and the illicit slot. So basically when the response has two different parts. The first one is the session attributes that we are sending around, and then the dialog action. In here we can say if it's a illicit slot, a delegate, a close, a confirm intent, or a illicit intent. And this is a validation only, so we will go into use illicit slot and delegate. So what it means when the dialog action is a delegate. It tells Lex to choose the next course of action based on the bot configuration. So for example, if everything is fine, we will send a delegate like, yeah, this validation looks good. Continue doing whatever you're doing. That's fine. But if the validation is not fine, then we want to send an illicit slot that tells Lex that the user is expected to provide something else, some other slot in this response. So for example, we want to say, okay, you pick a double latte, but that doesn't exist. Maybe you want to input another size. You can check more information about the responses and the requests from the AWS documentation. They have quite a nice document there on how different bits of the response are, and I will show you a little bit in our code example. So let's get started with the code. The first thing we are going to do is, I will not show it here, but we need to create a new slot type that is the coffee sizes, and I will add a couple of utterances to our intent. I would like to order a large latte, and then I will add the slot also in the slot description of the intent. That you know how to do. You can go and follow the previous video if you don't know what I'm talking about, but that's needed for this. And then we'll have the size, what size you want, and it's not a required slot, so only it will happen maybe in the utterance. So if you don't order any size, you will get normal by default. And also I added it in the confirmation prompt. The next thing we are going to do is we are going to create a new project for our Lambda. I will use Serverless framework as always to manage my Lambdas, because I really like the way that Serverless framework takes care of everything and with one command. So I will use Serverless framework, but you can use directly the Lambdas or other ways to deploy your Lambdas. So I'm creating an npm project, and I'm going to create a Lambda Serverless framework project inside that npm. And now I can open it in Atom and we start coding. So we have a handler, we have a serverless YAML. The first thing, as always, when you're working with Serverless framework, you want to change the name of your service. So you have a new name. And the next thing we are going to do is put the real region, because I think in my settings I have European region and Lex is only available from US. Then we are going to change the name of the functions we are calling intents. We are going to our handler and we are changing the name on our method to be intents, so it matched the name of the one that we just put in the serverless framework. Now I will replace all this with just a basic callback, because this is not an HTTP proxy, we are just using an event callback. So I replace everything that was there with this text. And basically what is this is just calling a function that is called dispatch that I will create now in a new file, and is returning that response in a callback to Lex. So basically Lex is sending the event and is getting the callback with the response. And if there is an error, we shall send an error. And there we can see that from the event.bot.name we are getting the name of the bot, as I showed you before when we were getting the request. That information is there. Now I create a new file called dispatch, and we can call this dispatch that will be taking care of the Lambda. I like to do everything in small files, it's easier for me to read, and when you start adding intents, this will be like helpful to have everything in smaller bits. Now we create a new file, a new module called dispatch, and there we have the request and also the callback, and we will log the user ID that we will need later when we are using our registration in the future videos. And then we have the current intent, because you can have multiple intents in one bot, and also we will see that in a future video, but that's what I want to log these names there so you can see them. But now we only have one intent, and that's called order coffee. And if the intent name that we get in our request is equals order coffee, that is the name of the intent that we want to manage now and validate, then we will print that in the console, and then we will throw an error, so we can deploy. This will always form an error because there is nothing returning out from that console.log, but just to get everything set up, this takes always some minutes. So after this deploy, the next thing we're going to do is integrate this Lambda that we just created in our Lex, so the validations can go. So we have this Lambda, and now we go to Amazon Lex. You need to refresh if you have the page open, so the Lambda appear, and then you go to Lambda initialization and validation in the latest version of your bot, and you click initialization and validation code hook, and you find the right Lambda for you. Lex order coffee validation, and when you get that, just click OK, and it will give the right permissions to your Lambda. You save the intent, and then you need to build that. And from now on, we won't touch the bot anymore, so all the changes we are going to do are happening in the Lambda. So that's the nice thing of using the Lambda for validations. You don't need to build your thing every time. You just work with this, and it will just, like, every time you deploy the Lambda, this will be updated automatically. So that's pretty nice. And then we can try our bot. Like to order a coffee, an Americano, and then there is an error because we are throwing that error from the Lambda. So we can check the logs. This is how you check the logs from the serverless framework. SLS logs -f intents, that is the name of the function, -t, so it's tail, and we can see that we get that error that is expected because, well, we haven't put anything that the dispatch should be doing. Good. So now let's go and fix our code. We have a setting that is working, and let's create a new module called order coffee, and this will be the module taking care of this intent. When we have multiple intents, we will have multiple modules. Just a way to organize your code. You can have everything inside the handler.js as one big file. I prefer to have multiple files. So our order coffee module will have two variables there that will be taking care of the type of the coffee and the size of the coffee, and we will get them print, so you know. And then we will know that the invocation source is the dialog code hook, so it's not like we are doing the fulfillment, but we are validating the input. And then we want to create this Lex responses module that will take care of the Lex response, the delegate, and later the elicit slot. So that's just to build up the response. What this code does, if the source is a validation dialog code hook, it will just return nothing, basically. It will just let it go. It will be the delegate with the sessions attributes that we got from the request, and it will also put in the delegate the exact same slots as we had in the request. So this code does nothing, but I want to show you how to build it little by little, so you understand, instead of giving you a chunk of code that works. So now we deploy again, and then we can go and try the bot. I would like to order a large Americano, and then you will say get the fulfillment, yes. We can see in the logs the bot name, that is Cafebotio. We can see the dispatch user ID and the name, intent name, that is coffee order. We can see that coffee order was called at console print, and then we can see the slots, the Americano and the large that we printed in the coffee order module. And then if we put other things, the thing is that this is not validating anymore. So I would like to order a robot. Resembles to Lex like some utterance, so it will let you go. So I would like to order a robot, and then it will ask you what kind of coffee, because he doesn't recognize robots from the types of the coffee. When he recognizes that that's something similar to I would like to order a drink or I would like to order a coffee, I will ask you what kind of coffee, and if you input robot, as the validation is not really validating, it will let you go. Because now it's not validating against the slot types that we have defined in Lex, but it's validating against what is in the Lambda. So that's what we want to now make sure, that you cannot order robots anymore, that you just need to order the right lattes or cappuccinos or Americanos or espressos. So we go back to our code and we start working on those validations. So now I added this bit of code, and what this code does is first it will do a validation of the order. So it will get the coffee type and the coffee size, and it will validate that these two guys exist in our list of types and sizes. It will check that the type and size match together. So for example, as we said, the rule is that you cannot have a large espresso, that you need to have a double espresso. So it will check that type of things. And then if the validation is not successful, it will return a licit slot response to Lex. And that it will tell with the session attributes, with the name of the intent, and with the slot that was wrong. So it will send a null there. So for example, if we have the coffee type to be wrong, it will send just a null here. So the validation result returns some kind of object with a lot of different elements, and we will check it in a moment. Now I'm going to put that validate coffee order, and there you can see that there are all the rules. I will not write them with you because it's basic JavaScript, but the code is available in GitHub, so you can go and check it out. But the first one, two ifs, they're checking if that the coffee and the size exist in a list that I define later, and then if they exist, then they check if cappuccino, if its order is a cappuccino or a latte, the size is neither normal or large. If it's espresso, it's normal or double, and if americano is normal. These are like the validation rules. You can make them prettier, but and then whenever this validation fails, then there is this validation result constructor that will be returning like these files, and the size or the type is the one that is failed. So what is the violated slot, and then what is the message to return to the user. So we don't have, for example, if you order a robot, you will get a message, we don't have a robot, would you like to order a coffee? The most popular coffee is americano, and that's the message you will get. So that is later used in our order coffee dispatcher on the bottom. And then also in the top we have defined the types and the sizes that are the ones in our slots that we defined in Lex. We have latte, americano, cappuccino, espresso, double, normal and large, and those are the valid inputs. And now then when we get a validation result, if the validation is not valid, then we will grab the violated slots, that it can be size or it can be coffee, and we set it to null. And then we return that to the licit slots response that we are going to create in the Lex responses. We'll have the slot that will be null, that one in particular, and then it will set like drinks in the slot to elicit. It will say coffee, or it will say size, and it will show the message as well. So that's basically everything you need to do a validation. It looks like a lot of code, but bear in mind that there is like 25 lines of validation code. That's kind of plain JavaScript. So the Lex code is very small. So now we can deploy it. And mostly of all of these codes, that's what I like to separate it in these kind of intents and try to modularize as much as I can, because then you can reutilize the same base of this project for any other bot project. So it's very handy. You just change the logic of your intent and the validation rules, and it works. So after you do it once, you don't need to do it many other times. And now I can try it. We can type back, I would like to order a robot, to make sure that that's wrong. What kind of coffee? And then you say a robot. And then it will say, we don't have a robot, we would like to order a different coffee. Our most popular coffee is americano. And then it doesn't let you order. So now let's order americano. And it will say, an americano is coming up. Is that correct? Yes, good. So size is null and coffee is americano. So what if we want to give a size, default size? That we'll be doing later. We like to order latte, large latte, yes. Good. We like to order a espresso, a double espresso. It will let us do that. And then we want to order a large americano, and it should not let us do that because normal is the size for that. Good. Our validation works, and this last bit is like, if the size is not defined, then put it as normal. So then basically everything is normal. So our fulfillment will never get a null. So we can deploy again. The next thing we're going to do is we can publish this bot to our alias that we published in the previous episode. So if you don't know how to publish, then go and check that out. And also our bot is already integrated with Slack because we have done that before, so you can also check the previous video to know how integrated with Slack. So we assume that everything is set up. So the next thing we are going to do is we are going to our Slack bot and we will send the same exact message. I would like to order a coffee. What kind of coffee? An Americano. And then it will just, are you sure? Yes. Good. And then I would like to order a large Americano, and it will tell you, no, we don't have that size. Okay. Are you sure you want to order an Americano normal? Yes. Good. I would like to order a latte. I want to order a large latte, yes. And you see that it's kind of nice, and now the bot is a little bit smarter. This was the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give a big thumbs up. And if you have any comments, questions, or something you would like to see in this Lex series, just put it in the comments below and I always come back to you. In the next episode, as I said, we are going to continue working with AWS Lex and we are going to do lambdas and fulfillment. So if you're interested, follow the playlist and follow my channel. And around here, as always, there is videos that YouTube recommends for you from my channel. So if you want to continue watching, just click around and enjoy. And I see you in the next episode of FooBar. Ciao!